Russia stepping up pressure in the east, troops pushing into a strategic city that's a key gateway to the Donbas. So why is Moscow making the move now, and what can it mean for Ukraine's defences? Let's bring in our security and defence analyst Sean Bell, who joins us. And Sean, just bring us up to speed on what's happening on the front line.
Yeah, I mean, the news has been breaking about Kostyantynivka. Now, one of the things that we, apart from difficult to pronounce, you know, the war in the Ukraine hasn't actually...
I missed it.
I noticed you dodged it. But yes, we've been focused inevitably on the Iran war for the last 3-4 months. But actually, the war in Ukraine hasn't gone away. There's been lots of talk that Russia would actually mount some sort of summer offensive. It's very difficult to mount a credible offensive in the wintertime. There's no foliage around. Drones take over. But the critical area of the Donbas, which Russia hasn't yet taken, we've often talked about the fortress cities. I'm not sure we've got a map available at the moment. But there's four really key fortress cities, and Sloviansk, Kramatorsk and Kostyantynivka are the key ones. Russia has inexorably been moving its troops forward very, very slowly, gradually seeking to envelop the city. Why is this important? Because Russia's taken a huge number of other areas. If you take those cities, now all of a sudden beyond that, there's lots of open territory, and it would mean that actually Russia could take a huge chunk more of Ukraine relatively simply. And that's one of the reasons why geographically it doesn't look like much. Putin has effectively said, give me that territory and we'll call the war, we'll stop the war. But President Zelensky can't do that. And that's what we're seeing, this intensive fighting at the moment. How
kind of credible is this Russian effort? Because Russian efforts of the past would have seen artillery pieces, tanks, armoured personnel carriers, etc. These days, it's kind of, you know, the war's changed. It's a few men on motorbikes. It's people kind of commando crawling their way from house to house. You know, is this a large-scale assault and a huge wave of people, or is this just kind of cherry-picking off the edges?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, because I think if you remember the fight for Bakhmut a year or two back, basically Russia lost a huge number of people, and effectively the Ukraine strategy was just make them pay for every inch they step forward, and that's going to be the strategy. But Russia has also learned, it's been in this war for a while, so now rather than marching through the city, they try to envelop it, cut off the supply lines, and then basically starve everybody out in the middle. I think what's interesting, though, is you look at those Pokrovsk. We were talking a lot about Pokrovsk for a year. It took over a year for that to fall, over a year for Bakhmut to fall. Most military analysts believe it will be at least a year for each of those cities to fall, and therefore you're talking about at least 3 or 4 more years of fighting. Why is that difficult? It's difficult because actually Russia's now losing more people than it can recruit, so it's not a sustainable model at all. What is interesting is drones are very effective out in the countryside because you can see everybody. Less effective in the city because who's the good guys, who are the bad guys? Bad guys tend to hide in buildings, in rubble, a lot more difficult for them to be used effectively. But I also wouldn't lose sight of the fact, one of the reasons we've been given footage of this and some of the successes by Russia is because Putin is feeling pressure. Over the last 2 or 3 months, we've been talking about Ukraine advances, Ukraine gains, Ukraine attacks into Russia itself. And I think all of that is starting to get... And Putin, watching explosions go off around him in Moscow, he's trying to grab the narrative back a bit and demonstrate that they are still on the front foot. So it is a danger, but it's not the... We're not going to lose Kostyantynivka in a matter of hours.
And to that point, Ukraine has had success, more success in recent weeks and months than it probably had in the entirety of the last summer in 2025. So it's not without a fight itself. What can it do to try and stem the losses here?
I think what we're seeing is 2 wars happening. I know firsthand, a lot of our UK military and the American military have been trying to give advice to Ukraine that if you get locked in a war of attrition, you will lose. It's like 2 armies meeting on a field of battle. If you've got one that's twice the size of the other, it will lose. So you've got to fight a different way. It looks like that Ukraine is now making Russia pay a high price for every step it takes in the fortress cities. But away from that, it's got 2 strategies, one of which is to hit Russia, stop it generating the money they can, striking oil and the like, but also, interestingly, putting pressure on Crimea. We've been talking a bit about the last few days, but you've got to be able to support Crimea. There's very few arterial supply routes. Ukraine is putting a lot of pressure on those at the moment. It's not going to win the war, but a bit like Iran, which you led in through, Ukraine only has to win, only has to not lose to effectively win.